friends! Today we are going to talk about The Legend of Zelda, probably my favorite fandom of all time. Over the years, I've had many people ask me what Zelda game should I play to start off, what's kind of first in the timeline, and lots of questions basically involving that kind of topic. Just people trying to get into the Zelda fandom and not really sure where to start. And so that's kind of where this video is going to go today. What I'm going to talk about, kind of the 5 major Zelda games I think that people should start off with, and then kind of ebb and flow into the other Zelda games from there. This is coming all from a Zelda fan who has been playing Zelda for over a decade now. I started when I was pretty young, and I've just loved all of the Zelda games that have come out ever since I started. Personally, I started with the Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess game, which came out in 2006. I was very young when I played that game, to the point of where my dad had to play alongside me and try to help me understand what was going on. I do not recommend Twilight Princess as a first-time Zelda game because it is very different from other Zelda games. So learning from kind of where I came from as a Zelda fan, the games that I've played through, because I've played through almost all of them at this point, I would like to share first the top 5 Zelda games I think you should play in a specific order, all starting with the game Ocarina of Time. This is one of the older Zelda games. It came out in 1998. Personally, I played this game, I think second out of all the Zelda games I've played, and ever since I played that game, it has been a staple of, this is the game I recommend people play first if they're trying to get into Zelda. Ocarina of Time has a really great base of just general information that you want to know going into all other Zelda games. It has Zelda, Link, Ganondorf, a lot of the iconic enemies, a lot of the iconic dungeon. The flow of the game is very just generalized for what you're going to see in other Zelda games, and it's gonna really help you understand kind of the core story of Zelda, and then other games can take you further. But Ocarina of Time is going to be a really great balance for any other Zelda game you're gonna play. And so I highly recommend, if you want to start playing Zelda, please start with Ocarina of Time. It is going to save you a lot of questions down the road. It's not that hard of a game to get through compared to other Zelda games, so there's that. It's definitely not easy, but all in all, it is just a great starting place for if you are trying to get into Zelda. Usually when people ask me kind of just core basics about Zelda before jumping in, I always have a response that's related to Ocarina of Time in some way, just because it has, like I said, just general information about the whole Legend of Zelda franchise. That's the only game that I'm super hardcore that new Zelda fans kind of start with. Everything else I'm a little bit more lenient with, but I think coming in second place, Skyward Sword is a great one to start off with after Ocarina of Time, in my opinion. This game came out in 2011. I did play this game right when it came out. I played it on the Wii. This one is really special because this is when they introduced the gameplay of having your remote and nunchuck as being very sensory, which in my opinion is really special and causes such a fun and unique way to play through the game, because basically your remote is acting as your sword. Whichever way you swish it is what you're watching Link on the screen do, which is really cool. And then your nunchuck is your shield. So if you push it outward, you're going to activate your shield. And so this also just involves a lot of just like movement when you're playing the game. It's not like you're just playing with your thumbs and your pointer fingers like any other game on the market. Skyward Sword, I feel like, was first in really involving people playing the game to actually move and to stand up. There were many times when I was fighting bosses and I was standing up, playing with swishing around my remote as a sword and using my nunchuck as a shield, and it's just so much fun in my opinion. But this game as a whole has the basic Zelda elements. Of course, we have Link and we have Zelda and we have the main big bad guy, but this game does follow a very different storyline than any other Zelda game. Of course, we are up in the sky for a lot of it, going down on the ground, which is unlike any other Zelda game. This storyline is very light-hearted compared to other Zelda games like Twilight Princess and Majora's Mask, so I also feel like Skyward Sword should be kind of one of the first ones you play just to get into the flow of Zelda games without completely freaking yourself out with some of those darker games. Number 3 on my list, if you are feeling ready for a more kind of dark-ish, kind of gory-ish side of Zelda, I recommend playing Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess is my favorite Zelda game, so yes, I am a little bit biased. Like Skyward Sword, it has the general kind of basic element of a Zelda game with our 3 main characters, Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf, but it goes on an entirely different mission that is unlike any other Zelda game. We are having a lot of the same kind of enemies like we do in Ocarina of Time, like I mentioned earlier, but we have a very different kind of gameplay. This was also basically the first Zelda game that had very realistic animation while playing through the game. Skyward Sword kind of followed suit with that after Twilight Princess came out in 2006. Skyward Sword came out a little bit later in 2011. Both of those games kind of go hand in hand for having the same kind of style of animation and gameplay, but one is very light, one is very dark. You will see that as soon as you start playing. Number 4 on my list, if you're wanting to jump back to something a little bit more lighthearted after Twilight Princess, I suggest playing Wind Waker. This game came out in 2002, another one that I played on the Wii and GameCube, so very similar to the kind of gameplay of Ocarina of Time if that's the way you're deciding to play. Of course, all of these games can be found on multiple different consoles. I'm just kind of sharing which game consoles I played them on, which is basically the Wii, Wii U, and Switch for all of the Zelda games that I've played. Wind Waker is kind of the first one on this list that plays very differently. So we are out on the ocean, we have a different drive. Of course, we still have Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf, but it is very different because there's not like a land to follow like the previous Zelda games I have mentioned. The animation also is very different. It's kind of similar to Ocarina of Time, but a little bit more like chibi, a little bit kiddish. Coming in 5th place for which game I think you should play is Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess are going to be definitely the hardest ones on this list in my opinion. Majora's Mask is cool because it actually follows the story of Ocarina of Time, but it has a very different storyline. Just kind of similar characters, similar kind of vibes, same kind of gameplay-ish, but you're timed and you're dealing with lots of masks, as you can imagine from the title of the game. So be forewarned going into this game that it can be very, very frustrating because it's time-based. For me personally, I am super anxious. I get super stressed when there's time restrictions. So I don't play this game a lot. I have played through it multiple times, but this is definitely not one I suggest people play as a first timer. And although Ocarina of Time technically comes right before Majora's Mask, I don't really suggest playing them super back to back because Majora's Mask is so much harder than Ocarina of Time. Of course, if you have played more games before Ocarina of Time, then do whatever you want. But if you're a first timer, I don't really suggest playing them back to back because they are very different in the level of difficulty. So just to recap, the main 5 that I recommend people play in this order is Ocarina of Time, Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, Wind Waker, and then Majora's Mask. Basically, after that, I'm totally open for whatever people kind of want to play at that point. There are so many different ways you could go from there, but I think that those 5 games give you a good base of different storylines, the basic enemies you're gonna come across, the kind of dungeon crawler style of a Zelda game, and then kind of, you know, branching off from there, playing different styles of Zelda games that came out in the 1900s versus the 2000s, versus what we're getting today in our modern time, which is very advanced to, of course, Zelda games that I grew up with. that is going to wrap up my Zelda talk for today. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions about what Zelda game you think you should play next, please let me know in the comments. I would love to help anyone along their Zelda journey. If you have played Majora's Mask and that's it, and need a recommendation of where to go next, I would love to be that person that you come to and chat with. I would love to hear from you about anything Zelda, and I will be back for more Zelda videos because, like I said earlier, Zelda is probably my favorite fandom of all time. So all in all, I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was informative, and I will see you next time. Bye!